Hi, and welcome to my second episode, as I'm going to be calling them now, about the Super Metroid Integrated Level Editor, or SMILE. In this episode, I'm going to be focusing on about how to expand the size of a room. So we saw in the first video that I made, if you watched it, how to add tiles to a room, just making solid blocks and just a general overview, about Smile. The one thing I didn't tell you in my first video is each room has a certain number of tiles that you can put into it. What I mean by this is if I just save a room here, if you look in the top left, there are two numbers. So there's 353 and 462. So the lower number on the left indicates the amount of tiles that are actually used in the room, and the one on the right tells you the total number of tiles that you can use for this room. So the problem is, if you just take a room that already exists in Super Metroid, start adding complicated backgrounds or loads of tiles, you might actually reach this limit, and Smile doesn't like that, and it'll just cause you loads of problems. So what I'm going to show you in this video is basically how to make this number on the right much larger, so you have a lot more information to work with. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove any headers you might have on your ROM. It depends on which one you've downloaded as to whether there'll be a header or not, but I'll just quickly show you what to do about that. So if you go to Tools, then go to Header, and then Remove Header, you'll get a lovely user-friendly dialog box appear saying, don't mess with what you don't understand, are you sure you want to remove the header? Go ahead and click yes, but then another one will appear saying, or may appear I should say, saying Smile thinks this ROM doesn't have a header, do you want to remove it anyway? Now if you're like me and you receive that dialog box, click no. You don't want to try and remove something that it doesn't think it has. From personal experience, I tried doing this in one video before this one, just as a kind of a proof of principle for myself. And what happens is it removes actual using data that is used by the ROM, and it just messes everything up. You don't want to do that. So if you get this box appearing, just click no, and you can be fairly safe that Smile knows what it's on about, and you don't have a header. So that's just an aside, just for you need to do that because basically the header will affect some of the stuff we're doing later about finding where data points to in the ROM. So let's get down to it. So first thing we're going to do is we want to add some spare space to the end of our ROM that we're going to use for making larger rooms. So what you're going to do is you go to Tools and then Expand ROM. It will say add a bank to the end of the ROM, and a bank is basically just a huge set of data that would be used for these purposes. So yeah, you go to yes, and then if it's the first time doing it, as is the case in this ROM, it will say the bank you have created is $E0. So that's just the name of the bank, and each bank you create has 32,000 bytes of room data. And I believe you can add up to 32 banks, and for those that know hexadecimal, this will start at E0 and go all the way up to FF. For most hacks you probably won't need that many banks though, you probably will need only a few realistically. It depends on the amount of changes you're going to make to the rooms. If you're overhauling the entire of Super Metroid, you'll probably need a few banks, sure, but you won't need all of 32. Right, so now we've added a bank, we should probably go ahead and see what it looks like. So for now, close Smile, and what you want to do is you want to download a hex editor. I use HXD, which I'll put a link for in the video description. And you're going to open your ROM into it. So yes, that is the one I just saved. So we're going to open that. And this may be a shock to those who have not seen any kind of hex data or ROM data before. So just to quickly explain then, On the left hand side it says offset, and this goes all the way down, and you have these numbers increasing by 1 in hexadecimal to the right. So just quickly, it starts at 0, and with hexadecimal in this case we'll start at 0 and it increases up to 0th, and that corresponds to 15 in decimal. So there's 16 bytes per line, and to basically how you read off these offsets then, it's fairly simple. Just think of it like a table. So if we take where the cursor is now, what I've highlighted, this entry corresponds to 00000104. It's fairly straightforward, and if you're not really that confident with it, you'll certainly get used to it. But that's an aside. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the offset that we've created, the start of the bank, which you can do by doing search and then go to, or Control G as I've just done. And you want to type in 300,000 as the offset here. Make sure you've got your hex and your begin dials ticked. And if we go to it, we can see that it's just FFs all the way down. And basically this makes sense, because all you've done when you've added a bank is you've added empty space to the end of your ROM. So obviously there's no reason to fill that space, it's obviously going to be empty. And the start of your bank that you've added will be at 300,000, and we'll go all the way down to 307 FFF. And that's the end of that first bank. Simple enough. Right, so now we're going to use the start and the end of the bank within some Smiles files. So you can close the hex editor, and if you go to directory where you've got Smile, just click on Files, and then go all the way and click on this level entries.txt file. Basically what's going on in this file, well, these are information about the rooms in Super Metroid, and it basically tells you the tiles that are used in each room. So for the first room that's stored here, it's at an offset in the hex that we've just seen at 2142BB. The leading zeros are not used in this file, and it will use data from that offset up to 2156E7, and then the next room that's stored here will start from 68. And not all the information that's stored for this room will actually be used. Like we saw with the room when we first started, there is some spare space, a little bit of spare space, I should say, to play around with. And we're going to kind of replicate that in this video. So if you want to scroll all the way down to this level entries, if you've got a clean ROM and clean Smile, you've not done anything to it, you should have 2FF000 as the last entry here. What we're going to do, we're going to add the start of the bank, which is 300,000, and then we're going to add the end of the bank, which we're going to say is 308,000. Strictly speaking, that's actually the start of another bank that we'd add, but it doesn't really matter. It's different by 1, and it's not going to cause any problems with Smile. So we've saved that, and we've added those to this file. What I'm going to show you now is another program that you will want to download, and I'll put a link to it in the video description. It's something called Lunar Address. What this is, it's a program that converts the offsets that you see in the ROM data into what's known as a SNES low ROM address, which is the address that Smile interprets. So if this is the first time opening Lunar Address, make sure you've got this second low ROM to PC dial ticked. Make sure you've not ticked this include copier header, and just for now, make sure this format results is unticked. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in 300,000, which is the address we're going to use in Smile. Well, at least that's the PC file address for the start of the bank. And in Smile, this corresponds to E08000. Now, it's not very clear how that comes about, but if I go to Format Results, probably makes it a little bit clear. So you can see here it's now got $E0:8000. So you can basically see here that a PC file address is a combination of a bank and an address within that bank. Simple as that. Why it starts from 8000? Well, it's just a property of the SNES low ROM addresses. If it's anything under 8000, then it adds 8000 to it. It is what it is, and if you ever get confused about whether it's the right address that you've got, you can always use Lunar Address to double check. Anyway, so that's basically what Lunar Address is doing, and we're going to be using this quite a lot through these series of videos. And you're going to make a note of this E08000. We're going to close the level entries. I'm going to go back to Smile and open our ROM. And in the ROM, we're going to go to that first room that I opened, which, for those who can't quite see the screen, it's 793AA. And here we are. So just to confirm again, these are the available tiles on the left. Oh, so this is the number of tiles you've used, sorry, on the left, which is 353, and the number of total tiles is 462. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to change where the level data for this room points to. So we're going to have to go to Edit at the top, and then Pointers, and this is what I showed in my first video. This is a list of all the pointers that are used in this room. Quite a few. So all we're going to do for the moment, don't change any of the others. All you're going to do is click on the level data and type in E08000. You're going to go to Save Pointers, and then a box will appear saying, do you want to copy the data to the newly pointed locations? So yes, you copy the data that already exists to that new location, or no, you use the data that's already there. Now, for the level data, we want something initially to work with, and certainly if we're only expanding for more tiles, we don't want a blank canvas. We want to use what's already there. So we want to copy the data to new location. So tick yes. You can close that dialog with the pointers on, and look at this. So now we have 32,768 tiles that we have available for this room. And that's quite a lot. There's a lot more than you're going to need for any room you can imagine, and any room you can physically make in Smile as well. And with this extra space, this basically allows you to do things like, if you want to have a complicated background, you want to add more tiles, make it really complicated a room, you can do. You can also change the dimensions of the room, which I'm going to talk about in the second part of this video. And what we're going to do for the time being is we're going to assume that you've edited this room, you've done what you want to do to it, you've expanded it, you've added tiles, whatever you want to do. What I'm going to show you now is how to repoint the level data of another room. So basically, you don't want to leave rooms with this much free space. It's kind of a good idea to know where the room data should finish. So we're just going to save everything in Smile, and then we're going to quit it. We're going to go back to our hex editor and open our ROM. And let's see what the level data looks like that we've just copied. So we're going to go to offset 300,000 once again. And look at this. We had FF for quite some way all the way down this bank. Now we've actually got some data in there. So you can see that it's actually copied the data properly in Smile, so that's a good sign. What we're going to do now is we're going to make sure we leave enough space so that when we point to another location in this bank, there's enough space so that there are enough free tiles left so Smile's happy, and also just in case you want to do some small edits, like maybe you want to change a tile later on or add a couple of tiles, you can do that. The general rule of thumb is to leave about 20 lines between the end of this room and the start of what would be the next room. So I'm going to take 3002C0 as the level pointer for the next room. So I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to use that in a moment. So we can close the hex editor, but what we want to do is find out what does this correspond to as a SNES low ROM address. So we're going to type in 300,000 and 2C0 into the PC file address, and that gives us E082C0 as our SNES low ROM address. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to be using both of these addresses now. The first one, we're going to use the PC file address, and we're going to do pretty much the same as kind of what we did earlier. So if you go back to your Smile directory, click on Files, and then Level Entries, scroll all the way to the bottom, and this time we're going to add in that 302C0 between the start and end of our banks. So you can see, like I explained earlier, that level we've just edited will then have level data from 300,000 to 302C0. And the next level we're going to use at this pointer is going to start from that location and finish at the end of the bank. Simple as that. So let's save the level entries. And now we're going to use our SNES low ROM address in Smile. So let's go back to Smile. Just get rid of Lunar Address for now. I'm going to open it up. This time we're not going to do the same room because that won't make any sense. We want to repoint for a different room. And I'm going to choose 79A44. And if you're following this, I suggest you do the same because it'll kind of help you understand what's going on a little bit better if you're doing it as I do it. So it's going to save the room to show you that here's an example of why you don't just edit any old room in Super Metroid. In cases like this, there is not a lot of space for 3 tiles, basically. There's 34 tiles, there are 3. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you, I'm going to do the changing of the level pointer again. So this is going to be E0, oops, sometimes this happens if you're not pointing, if you're not clicking on, oh god, so this is not working, fuck. So it's really annoying when this happens. It's just kind of, it's editing something and then it's stuck doing that. So let me just close Smile if I can find it. And so apologies for that. Sometimes it does happen. You need to be very careful when you're editing anything in Smile because you can, if you press E, you'll go into testing, which is what happened to me. Let's just open that room again. We didn't change any pointers, so we're back to where we were. So let's go edit pointers again. And this time, make sure you've definitely clicked on the level data, which apparently I didn't. And we're going to type in E082C0, which is the offset or the SNES low ROM address that we wrote down just a second ago. Save pointers. Yes, we do want to copy the data. Close the dialog and look at this. So we have a lot of spare space for this room now. Not as much as the first time, but we still have quite a lot. If we save this room and go back to that first one that I showed you, save that, look at this. So we had 462 tiles available to us before, now we have 704. So what this means is that the bank or the data in it has been redistributed properly, so we're good to go with editing the new room. You obviously don't want to edit the old one because you'll cause weird problems and Smile will moan for not having enough space. So this is the point where you can rinse and repeat the last few steps. So you can edit the room, you can add more tiles, you can make it larger, backgrounds, all that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do now in the second part of the video is show you exactly what you got to do to change the dimensions of the room. And I've been holding off on this because it's not, while it's quite easy versus what I've shown you just now, it's something that has a lot of risk associated to it. So before you change the height and width of any room, there's 2 things you've got to do. Make sure that you've expanded your ROM and have enough space to play around with this room. If you're following this guide or tutorial, you already will do. You'll have a lot of free space. And you also want to make sure you have a backup. Backups are always very useful to have anyway, and this is one case where things can go wrong very quickly if you don't. So to change the size of the room, It's fairly simple. You just go to edit and then room properties, and you have this box here, which I showed in my first video. And basically all you want to do for this point in time, we're just going to add an extra row of screens to this room. So change the height from 1 to 2. Click OK. It says it must save and reopen this room. Yeah, fine, do whatever you like. And then there we go. We've got an extra row of rooms. Now, they're all filled with the top part of the orange/yellow door cap. This is perfectly normal, and if you wanted just to change the height, as we have done, all you have to do is you can remove them any way you want. I tend to use black, so it gives me a clean canvas to work with. And there you are. So you've expanded the height of the room, easy peasy. So height is fine. Height causes no problems. It's good to have a backup anyway, just in case you change the height and want to change it back. But it's not really that much of an issue. What is an issue is changing the height. Sorry, not height, the width. I get confused with myself. So when you change the width, there's a few more steps you need to do. So the first one, you want to select at each door one by one. So you right click and drag to select the entire door that'll be in the clipboard. And you want to move this next to at one other door in this room. Now, if you were to do this on your own with a bigger room with more doors, you'll have to do this several times to make sure that all the doors are next to each other. Once you've done that, you're going to have to select all the doors again, so you have all of them in your clipboard this time that you see here. And from this moment on, you don't want to right click anywhere, because if you do, then you'll copy a random tile, and certainly at this stage in terms of room editing, making the doors and setting them all up again is a real pain in the ass. You don't want to mess about with it. So with that in mind, you've got the doors on the clipboard. Go back to your room properties, and this time we're going to change the width from 2 to 3. So click OK, save and reopen, fine by us. Boom! What we've got is something that looks like a horrible, horrible mess. Basically, this is normal behavior for Smile, although it's not nice behavior. Rather than adding, say, yellow door or orange door caps to one side of the screen, it just kind of messes everything up. That's why I told you to put the doors on the clipboard, because then you can just paste it in the top left like that, and then you can clean everything else up. So this is what I like to do, is I like to make sure I have a completely blank canvas to work with, and this makes it easier in terms of making the level once again. So you're going to have to go all the way like this. I've just selected some tiles which were just air X-ray, because then you'll know you won't get stuck when you're testing it because you've accidentally put a solid block somewhere. And you're gonna just copy it, or do this all throughout the room, just kind of brush it across. And what you'll have left is just your 2 doors and these 6 tiles. Now, one thing I didn't realise when I first started using Smile, or before I used Smile I should say, is that these are actually enemies. And for this video, we're not going to do anything with them, we're going to just leave them as they are. But what we are going to do is we're going to move these doors back into a sensible position. And in Smile, what we're going to do is we are going to put this in the middle of one of the screens. It's generally how it's done in the Super Metroid originally, and there's not much a reason to do it any other place, to be honest. It makes it a bit easier to keep track of doors as well. So 3, 4, 5, 6 tiles above and below the door puts the door in the middle of the screen. And the same for this one. I'm going to put it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the middle there as well. And now we can use just the air X-ray to get rid of those original doors. Done. And that's all there is in terms of changing the height and the width. The one thing that I'm going to show you is an issue with testing now we've moved the doors. I'll explain how to rectify this in my next video, but I want to show it now since it's at a reasonable enough position to do it. So I'm going to select some blocks down here, paste them, and yes, it's always good to make sure they are solid block. If you don't do this, then when you test the room, Samus will fall through the screens and it will look really, really weird. So all I'm doing is just connecting these two doors by a row of blocks. Now, ordinarily, I would show you how to change the scroll information, so the color of these boxes, in the new areas that formed. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that these top two screens are as they are when they first formed. They were blue that we saw, and now we've added some more. There's a red one that's appeared, and then these three have no box around them. As far as I understand it, if there is no box around it, it will default to blue. And although I would explicitly make these blue, there is a really good reason why you don't want to do that. Again, I'll explain it in the next video, but for now, let's just ignore that and just leave this as it is. So let's save the room, and everything seems normal there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to test this room. So we've moved the door. We've not really done anything that fantastic. We just moved this door to the right, so we moved it from one screen here, from this position to here. And the one on the left is as it was originally. So we've saved the room. If you press E when you're on any of these door tiles, so in this case it's either the ones that don't have a number or ones that will have a number if you've got multiple doors, press E and it'll lead through the door it was connected to. Now if you press E again, you will go into your chosen emulator. I use SNES 9X myself because it's a very common one, and we're going to test the room we just made. So we're going to start outside the room here, open the door, let's go through, and look at that. It gives something quite weird. You know, the room shouldn't look like this. If we go all the way to the left, that's the door that we placed, that's perfectly fine. Go to the door to the right, that door's there, but we came out of here. That's pretty weird, right? So let me just close that. So what's gone on? Basically, what's happened is we've moved the door to this right hand side, but what we haven't done is we haven't changed the door properties so that when you come through this door, it knows to spit you out here versus here. So because we haven't changed the properties, the door still has one of the properties which says, okay, spit me out at this highlighted position here. So that's why you've got this weird kind of door tear going on. And I'm going to show you how to do this in the next video, which will all be about these scrolls and the doors and even adding new doors. Now, the one minor thing I'm going to finish on, because I still have a little bit more time, I've not got that huge of a file at the moment. If you go to Tools and then Map Editor, you can see the effect that this increase in room has had. So if you look, this is the black box which kind of shows you a zoom of the room you're looking at. So you can see that it was just these two rooms which were a 2x1 that you can see in that 3x3 room tile image. But the white box that you see on this, where my cursor is now on the screen, that is the size of the actual size of the room. So the one thing you're going to have to do is, if you resize a room, you're probably going to have to update the map and you might have to move things around a little bit. While it's a little bit of a pain, it really isn't that hard to move things around and basically design your map. In fact, it's probably one of the easiest things you'll get to do, and probably one of the less dangerous or problematic things you can do. And that's all there is to it. So that's the end of my room expansion video. what I'm going to do, like I said, I'm going to show you how to fix this weird door behavior and explain a bit more about doors in my next video. I'm going to show you how to change the color of these scroll windows or screens, whatever you want to call them. And we're also going to finish with how to add a bit more doors to the room, which is a bit complicated in terms of what you've got to do, but it's fairly simple, and I'll talk you through it step by step. So once again, thanks for watching. I'll add links to the hex editor and Lunar Address in the description, and stay tuned for next time. Cheers.